Hi, this is Growing Up Aspen with Andy Collin and Chris Pomeroy, and our new podcast, Movie Chat, with some students that we grew up with that got into the film, entertainment, commercial world, and we're here to talk about our experiences and how Aspen pushed us in our direction. Today, we are here with Ivan DeWolf, who went from local sculptor in high school to working in special effects in the film industry for movies like Pirates of the Caribbean. Let's start with, what is your favorite film that got you into effects? In other words, you saw it and you were like, oh my gosh.
Well, American Werewolf in London.
Oh
It was
yeah.
probably, it's a funny thing. I remember that I was obsessed with and convinced that I was going to do special effects makeup when I moved to Colorado when I was 8 years old. So I had it in my head, and I was following this guy, Rick Baker, and I was really fascinated by the stuff. And I was following this guy, Rick Baker, since he did this movie It's Alive, which was this demon baby thing.
Yeah.
I remember that thing.
Yeah. But I just had this weird obsession with this stuff, and of course Star Wars was so important to me, but that was more opticals than characters than the creatures. But I was fascinated by the creatures stuff and Dick Smith and Little Big Man and all those films early on that had me fascinated.
Yeah.
But then when American Werewolf came out, it was like fundamentally a big step forward in what was possible, and I was blown away, and I was like, That's what I wanted, and my last name being DeWolf, of course, a werewolf movie.
Yeah.
Right home for me. But it really made me, and I think in a lot of ways it was attributed to one man, and I do think that Rick Baker, as one man, had he had a team. Of course, it wasn't just him working alone. But as a little kid, I did sort of envisioned it as just him working alone, which it wasn't the reality. But he still was absolutely the one who pushed the envelope. And that whole concept of do something that have a vision in your mind of this is what I want to see happen, and I'm gonna make it happen. No one's and people are like, well, no one's ever done that before. No, that's not possible. What do you think? No way. You just go fucking do it.
Well, in those days,
and that to me was the fundamental. That was probably the film that had the greatest impact.
I feel like the thing about American Werewolf in London that was so cool to me was it was a practical effects film, and they did so much with it, whereas now it's so easy to just do it in CG, and I felt like there is just something cool about it being an effect. I mean, The Thing was just fantastic,
The Thing was unbelievable. Yeah, absolutely. That was that pushed it even further.
Yeah.
Well, they stand the test of time too. I mean, you go back and see I'm thinking of when he transforms in American Werewolf, and
yeah.
I mean, you can sort of see that it's fake. You get that whole uncanny valley thing going on, but
a little bit, yeah, for sure.
But it's like, man, that still holds up.
Yeah, the thing is that the work that was done in that was so much higher quality than anything that had been done that week. It just was like he had this vision of well, it could be this good,
right?
And he just went out and made something that was that good. Which he could have done half of what he had done, and audiences would have responded fairly well, and it would have moved onward.
I also bet too that John Landis and him worked pretty well together in that.
Yeah, it's very likely. Well. Yeah.
But so now, can you talk about take us from effects like that movie in that movie to effects in what you're doing now, because it's such a different world.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I first got started working in computer animation and visual effects and for feature film. My first film that I worked on was the Power Rangers movie. That was when Apollo 13 came out. I almost worked on Apollo 13, but I just liked the team at VIFX better than the team at Digital Domain when I met them. The few people that I first met. The thing is back then, every film we worked on, there was none of that fear of oh my God, no one's ever done this before, because every film was something that no one's ever done before. So when I started working on The Relic, there had never been a creature in a film with hair, and I had to do hair on this creature, and I was like, well, okay, how am I going to do it? And I just was I threw myself at him. I'll figure this out, and I did. And I had to learn a lot of linear algebra in order to make it happen, and it just was it came to me easily because I had a use for it, right? And that kind of that era to me was so appealing because every film was kind of like we're scratching our head. How are we going to pull this off? Nowadays, it's ossified. Nowadays, it's like the film comes along. It's like, well, they would like some creature effects, so our creature team will come together. The creature will be modeled by the creature modeling team. The rigging will be done by the rigging team. We have some specialists that do this and this and this, and this is exactly. And it's just this it's a factory.
Right.
And if you come along and you look at it, you're like, hey, you know what? Actually, we could do this a little differently. We could do this slightly better. They'll be like, shut up, kid. You're gonna knock our boat over. We're barely alive as it is. You do it the way we've always done it. And that's not. I don't like it anymore. And to be honest, I left Sony Imageworks three years ago now, and I worked in virtual reality at a large tech company. I was working just as a software engineer, and I was done with visual effects for film. And I'm not sure that I'll go back because the industry's really no longer appealing to me. We're not trying to do anything new. We're just trying to like crank out the next film, do a nice job of it, but not break new ground, not take any risks. That's just not something we can afford to do because all the visual effects companies, the visual effects business model is fundamentally flawed. So it is not possible for them to really be a profitable company. There's no visual effects billionaires, that's for damn sure.
Right.
Fundamentally it's flawed. So all of the companies are struggling to survive, knowing that the next thing that's going to kill them will be coming down the path soon. And there was just another big round of very large companies dying just in the last month. And that happens every 5 years or so. There's all of the big companies die off.
But don't you feel like it's always been a frontier? In other words, all these studios all started with the frontier that they were doing, whether it was ILM with Star Wars, whether it was Digital Domain with Terminator, whether it was
Pixar,
Lord of the Rings with Weta. Do you know what I mean? It always was something pushing something. They were frontier people that started the studio, and then they sat on their laurels. And I feel like it's time for frontier people like us that have always pushed stuff. You're comfortable on the edge. You're comfortable with something that hasn't been done before that needs to be done. And it feels to me like all these new tools, they all need to be corralled by those frontier people. And the problem is that they haven't been. They're getting corralled by the tech people who wrote the code, and that's it.
Yeah.
They need
or the producers who are like, just how can I use this to make the most amount of money?
Right.
Yeah. Or can I just throw my script in and get a scene? And it's like,
I think there's a fine line there between the big money machines and the pirate radio kind of thing. I think what you're talking about, Andy, is somewhere in between there, where actual studios come out and do stuff, story-based things that actually become viral or something. I don't know.
Well, I just feel like
that's lightning in a bottle,
Thanks for listening to Growing Up Aspen's Movie Chat podcast with Chris Pomeroy and Andy Collin and Ivan DeWolf. And we'd like to thank the Aspen Times and the Aspen Daily News for letting us use material for our book, Growing Up Aspen, Adventures of the Unsupervised, which you can get at twistandturnpress.com or any local bookstore. Thanks.